The first trailer for Sony Pictures' Morbius film seems to suggest that that movie will be taking place in continuity with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But is it though? Let's break down the ins and outs of this situation and what it means for fans. This video is brought to you by executive producer Ryan H. via Patreon. What's up, everybody? It's Josh. Welcome back to the channel. Do me a favor and smash that like button. Let's get right into this, guys. Of course, this is all about the Morbius trailer and that end cap. Why do I feel like I have to say spoiler warning for that trailer? Probably because that's how big of a deal it was when you see Toomes at the end of that trailer. You literally see the Vulture, Michael Keaton as the Vulture, in the exact same prison outfit that he is wearing in the post-credit scene of Homecoming. Oh, and on a side note, there's actually a person that looks a lot like Jared Leto in the background where you can see Scorpion. Someone pointed this out on Reddit. Very interesting. And so it's obvious that Sony wants people to think that this is connected to the MCU, but is it though? This is where the craziness comes in, man. Ryan and I had a lot of good conversations about this, chatted about it yesterday, chatted about it today. We decided to do this as a produced video because it's intense. This is something I think a lot of people are questioning, and we wanted to sort of break down what we think is going on and big concerns that we both have with regards to what Sony is doing. Now, for the record, I gushed super hard on that trailer yesterday. Ryan was not as taken by that trailer as I am. He thought it was good, but he sort of, pumped the brakes and sort of brought me back to reality a little bit. And some of the things that he talked about are legit, and they do give me some concerns for what Sony is doing. Ryan brought up the point that the MCU is clearly the big leagues. That is clearly the big leagues, and you don't really have to look that hard to see that that is 100% true. I mean, look at what's going on with Deadpool 3. Ryan Reynolds certainly wants to come over at Marvel. He literally called it the big leagues on that live show that he was on recently. And even in the writing and different things that were going on with the Deadpool team, they talked about how Marvel's going to allow them to play in the R-rated Deadpool universe, and they hope to be able to play in the MCU playbox or sandbox. Like, it's obviously the big leagues. That's why Sony wants to be attached to it. But it's so interesting because when Kevin Feige said that Spider-Man is the only superhero that can swing between cinematic universes, that really made us all think as fans that there would actually be two cinematic universes. That's like what that statement means. But it seems like Sony really wants people to forget about all that and just think that this is the same universe. It's all connected, right? But, we know that that's not exactly the case. However, it was probably always the plan from Sony's perspective. If we look back to the infamous Amy Pascal, Kevin Feige interview, the one where she is making him look super uncomfortable and he's like squeaming in his chair at everything she's talking about. She literally says that they are building at Sony a universe for the Tom Holland Spider-Man to eventually come back and play in. And we can't prove this for sure, but just seeing the different things within this trailer that kind of look to establish that for Sony, like the Spider-Man on the wall with murderer written across from it, or the Vulture stinger at the end, it seems like Sony was always going to be doing this, and this is likely already established when they walk away from the Sony Marvel arrangement, because remember, back then we all knew Tom Holland was still going to be going on to make Spider-Man movies. In fact, he told people in different interviews that he's still excited for what Sony plans to do with the character. And basically, guys, this is probably all legal from Sony's perspective, because I know there were people that didn't get it, that it came onto the screen that it was the studio that brought you the Spider-Man movies and Venom, but that's actually correct. They were the studio that produced that movie. They spent money on it. They had producers on it. It was all happening on Sony lots. It was a collaboration with Marvel Studios, and Kevin Feige helped to produce, but that's not wrong. Those are Sony movies, right? Like, the majority of that money goes to Sony, even though Disney does see a lot on the back end and things through merchandising. The thing is, Sony can take any character that's been in a Sony movie. So they could technically probably take Vulture. They could take Mysterio. They could probably take any character that showed up in one of those Spider-Man Far From Home, Homecoming movies that isn't strictly owned by the MCU. And so you have to ask yourself, is that what is happening? Is Sony trying to just make it seem like everything's connected and try not to let people think about it too much, and that's how it's actually going to happen? And I guess the big question is this really a big deal? Are casual audiences going to care about that? Is it just going to be us hardcore nerds that are really concerned about this? Is it going to be confusing to people? And is this going to just potentially lead to a diluting of the great continuity that Marvel has created? Because, you know, Ryan and I were talking about from a branding perspective that it's just so awesome what Marvel has been able to do. The fact that everything matters and is connected, it's super clean, and part of the reason they're able to do that is because of Feige's kind of ironclad way of doing things. I mean, we just lost Scott Derrickson from Doctor Strange 2, and this is likely all because Scott didn't want to make the movie that Feige needed Doctor Strange 2 to be. And so once you have not only people that aren't listening to you, but an entirely different studio, is that not concerning to what that would do with the continuity? Basically, things could happen where Spider-Man's in a movie over at Sony doing something during a time where he's also over here in a movie over at Marvel, or maybe they just don't want him to be out in the public because they're doing Secret Avengers or something. So there's all sorts of ways that this could technically screw things up for Marvel if Sony just doesn't care about that continuity. And they actually have a good opportunity. Sony has a good opportunity to get this rolling in this year because this is sort of an off year for Marvel, sort of a step back for Marvel. And we would hope that maybe Feige is going to figure out a way to make this clean, to make it so that, yeah, no, it makes sense. Peter leaves the universe through the multiverse and ends up in the Sony universe, right? That would be something really simple so that those continuity problems don't happen once we get to next year and we're doing 4 movies and 3 shows a year, right? If Spider-Man is going to continue to be in the MCU, they need to be on the same page. That's what's really concerning. So I totally get that. And given Sony's track record in the past, I think Ryan and many other people could be concerned about this. And I truly think that if that's what's going on and Sony's trying to sort of pull a fast one on casual audiences, I don't know if that's going to work. And it could really force what had already been sort of a rocky relationship between them and Marvel to completely end. And I don't know if that would be on good terms or not. And so even though I am super excited for Morbius and I do want to see Spider-Man go over there, I would much prefer it if there was a diegetic in-story explanation for it. If the Peter from our Marvel Cinematic Universe literally jumps to another universe via some kind of bridge or portal or whatever, that would sit much better with me as a fan. And I think that's where I'm at. That's where Ryan is at. And I think too, just kind of given the rocky relationship, this is, in my opinion, truly what AVA Rad and that other dude were trying to do either way. This is what they were going to do. They were taking Spider-Man back and they're just going to put him into these movies. And I think ultimately they did want fans to just believe that that's the same Spider-Man, that this is all happening in the same world, that Thor could fly overhead at any moment, because I think that's more fun with the fans. The question is, how is Marvel going to deal with that? Is Marvel going to let that happen? What is that relationship going to look like? That's really, again, what is so concerning for fans. So to recap as best we can, it does appear that Marvel and Sony have different ideas of what the continuity will be like between the Tom Holland Spider-Man that appeared in the MCU films and the one that will appear in the Sony movies. And who knows if it's even going to be Tom Holland. I saw people out there saying they're going to be Tobey Maguire into that thing and everything like that. That would be even worse.
Pizza time.
So it looks like the continuity is going to go from those MCU Sony movies, the collaborations with Feige and Pascal, over to the Sony movies, but very little will come back over from the Sony movies into the MCU. I highly doubt that's anything Marvel will want to do unless it's all, connected and they control it all. But it does appear that Marvel cannot stop Sony from using characters that were in those Sony movies, at least ones that are connected via the Spider-Man license. Remember, guys, Sony owns the Spider-Man license. They own characters like Vulture. They own characters like Mysterio. They own characters like Kraven the Hunter. They produced those movies with Feige, and Sony allowed movies and characters that are owned under the Marvel licenses to appear in those Sony movies. That's what the collaboration was. So it appears like any character that's connected to Spider-Man specifically under the license agreement that was in those MCU movies can show up in Morbius and in Venom. I'm a little more optimistic about this than most. Maybe I was just really hyped on that Morbius trailer. I'm feeling the nostalgia of the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. I'm really excited to see those characters together, and I hope they get to hang out together, and I hope we get to see Tom Holland versus Tom Hardy Venom. That would be really cool, but I do understand the concerns. I think Ryan had a lot of good points when I talked to him, and so we wanted to do this video together, produced video brought to you by him. So let us know in the comment section, what do you make of this whole situation? Are you super pumped? Are you worried about Sony? Do you think it's time Feige started playing more nice? Whatever your thoughts are, let us know in the comment section below. And again, I want to shout out Ryan H. and all of my executive producers and anybody that supports us on Patreon in general. It really does help us out. YouTube is weird, tumultuous, hard to be consistent with, and the support we get on Patreon allows us to take chances and do all sorts of videos to really help our audience be super engaged and entertained with different kind of things. So shout out to you Patreon supporters. You guys are quite literally the best. And now let's shout out James Braun. Indeed, Ludwig Göransson is the composer for The Mandalorian. So shout out to you, James. And now let's ask another nerd card question before we get out of here. I want to know, what other Marvel movie was Morbius actually supposed to show up in? Supposedly there's a deleted scene with Morbius in this movie. What Marvel movie was Morbius going to show up in before? Answer that question in the comment section below. As I always say, hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.